Police-free schools. Well, that's a good idea.
How's that gonna?
Huh?
We're asking people not to film faces.
Okay, well, you got a mask. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to get your face. I mean, this is still America.
Okay.
I'm a patient, as you see. Anyway.
I don't think these people are consented to have consented to being filmed.
Well, that's all right. We're in an open space, so public space.
Chicago is a two-party consent state or
Yeah,
city.
but
so.
when it's an open space, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But I mean, they could get. Listen, if they don't want, you could have the University of Chicago police come and tell me that, and I'll surely listen. All right?
Okay. Just so everyone knows, you are being filmed right now. If you would like to cover up, please mask up. You are being filmed right now. You are being filmed and listened to right now.
I mean, don't you guys want people to see what you're protesting about?
We just don't want our faces around.
But why not? Don't you stand up for what you believe in?
We do. We do.
Well, then,
but we don't consent. We just don't consent.
Well, I mean, I'm not trying to be combative. I'm not trying to be combative. But if you have a like when I go and do things, I don't wear a mask because I want people to know what I stand, what I represent, right? Sure. And so I don't understand. Yeah. And there's two sides to the story, and I'm trying to get both sides. Yeah. That's all.
It's just like really pretty aggressive, honestly.
Taking a video is aggressive?
It is, yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, we want our privacy too, you know?
Well, why are you how could you on one hand say you want your privacy, but on the other hand you're protesting and bringing out your voices for a certain for Palestine, and you don't want to. You want privacy.
Yeah, we're honestly like for me personally, like I try to demonstrate a surveillance-free, like alternative life here in this camp, where we can live comfortably without the risk of everyone always watching or listening to everything that.
Well, that's a different topic that I agree with.
Yeah, and so in order for us to demonstrate.
But when you're trying to demonstrate and get a message out there, usually you want people to see it. That's the reason you're demonstrating.
Well, because of people that disagree and are trying to.
I didn't go to like a nice school. I only went to Elmer's College, so I'm not that smart.
It's not about. Oh no, it's not about. It's not. No, it's not about.
I'm joking.
And like I agree that you Chicago people can certainly like snobby and you are being filmed right now. Just so you know, you are being filmed right now. You are being filmed right now. You are being filmed right now, so you know. Okay, thank you so much.
I'm not doing anything aggressive.
Right now, so you know.
I got my own escort. Thank you.
Yeah, we're just trying to watch out for people who don't want to get filmed.
How are you? Hey, would any of you be willing to talk to me about your protest?
Yeah.
You're in a meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I connect you with someone who might be?
Yes, please.
Talking to?
Yeah.
Yeah, talking.
Oh, this looks like a teacher, maybe. Would any of you be willing to talk to me about the protest? I'm here peacefully.
Let me find a media person.
No?
Yeah, I think that there's probably a media person.
Yeah, I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm looking
Sure.
for. Let me look for the media person. Is there a media person on site or someone willing to talk to someone who have questions about the encampment?
We talked earlier about
okay.
how safe it feels.
Now I'm trying to get the students' perspective.
As I said, I don't know.
Anyone willing to talk to this person about the encampment? I might go.
No?
You are being filmed right now, by the way, so you know. So everyone knows. Is anyone willing to talk to this person? A media trained person, perhaps?
Him.
A person who would like more information.
I just want to know why, so there's two sides to this story, right?
She's not using my
Support
pronouns.
of Palestine,
Just hold tight. Hold tight.
support of Israel.
Being filmed right now, actively right
I mean,
now.
in the sense that there's two sides of desegregation. I mean, there's the segregation.
All right, there we go. Two sides to desegregation. You could stop that there. And then, so welcome. Are we on yet? Are we on? Okay, welcome to Behind Enemy Lines. So we have a real cool story today. Great guest, Sargis Sangrari. And he spent 20 years in the military. He's got a great story. He's also the CEO of the Near East Center for strategic engagement. So he's an expert on this stuff. As you could tell, Paul and I aren't. We're not experts.
You're obviously not an expert.
No, we're not. We're not experts. So we're
You're
really
walking around. There are two sides to every story.
Yeah, we're
I went
excited.
to Elmhurst College.
Yeah, I was
Teach
making
me
fun of-
about Palestine. Oh, wise college
Yes.
children living in tents.
I was making fun of them because they're a bunch of morons. So we're going to have a really cool show. What we're going to do is for the rest of the show, after we have Sargis come on and introduce himself, we're going to go through the rest of the clip. That young man at the very end there said there's two sides to segregation and desegregation, is going to talk about their views, their distorted views. The guy's very, very articulate.
Maybe in 1964 there was.
he's very articulate, but he's
you know
full
what?
of shit.
You know what? There is two sides because I just saw recently that Southern Illinois graduated like 8 different groups of kids because they graduated a black group
No
of
way.
kids.
You're
Yeah,
kidding me.
I got it on. I got it from Twitter.
Oh my God.
They got the picture. Here you go, right here.
Segregation is
Yeah, black, Hispanic,
brought back
Asian,
in our
LGBTQ, and non-traditional.
Oh my God.
No,
That's crazy.
no white ceremony, of course,
So
because that would be racist.
The Ku Klux Klan didn't even have to do anything. These colleges segregated this stuff on their own.
Yeah. So, and I just want to do a shout out because we got some 2 special guest followers that are following us now. They're very special. So we have Marxist fascist Jeff Tischler, writes for the Southern Poverty and Law Center. Guy grew up in Oak Park, went to college in Wisconsin, and he's acting like he's Mr. Chicago.
Yeah.
Then we have the other Marxist, Leslie Fuckett, and she's on the board at Downers Grove, and she doesn't want anybody to have the opportunity to have a different opinion from her. She's attacking us, but they're watching us. You know, all their comrades are watching us. So please, Tischler, fuck it, please. Like, share, and subscribe because we want the rest of you Marxists to follow us so you could see our point of view so that we can share it. So with that said,
I would just add that like not too long ago, the town we live in, well, the town I live in, Downers Grove, kicked off a conservative member of the library board, and by all investigations that have been done, it was because he disagreed with the other members of the board because they were all leftists. And then if you heard the village council talk about it, that's basically what they said. Because the guy admitted that, you know, one of them pointed out that he didn't break any of the bylaws, he didn't break the statute that's out there, and so they'll get rid of you if you disagree with them. And now we got Fugit in the last village council meeting, you know, going off on some unhinged rant about people on boards and commissions who contribute to the negative.
Our podcast, talk about the intro.
And then
podcast.
mentioned like or have a podcast with gunshots at the beginning of it.
This is like an entertainment show.
So
with
this
some
is
news.
the type of representative that you have in your community. Instead of worrying about, you know, setting a good example for the children and having a balanced perspective on the library board, she's going to kick them off if they don't agree with everything she says, and then she's going to go off and talk about the people she disagrees with during your taxpayer time. So she's, you know, she's an enemy to free speech.
Yeah.
And
we're going to do a special
show. You can't
show,
have your own
right?
opinion.
We're going to do a special show on her and the rest of those people.
I mean, it's ridiculous,
Yeah.
man.
So-
I felt like it was a threat.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I felt like it was a threat because if you don't agree with her, she's going to try to get you kicked off of any board in the. So there's no room for any conservatives, or at least the ones that she approves of.
Yeah. So, hey, you want to do that commercial real quick? 1 minute commercial, and then we'll have Sargis on. Yeah, are we on now? Okay, we can't see. I'm watching. It's delayed. Hey, welcome, Sargis Sangrari. Are you Italian like me?
No, I could be Italian. It depends. If need be. Most people call me sometimes Tony. It makes it easier, and we'll just go with it. So
okay. That's great. My son's
how
name.
How do you say your first name?
First name Sargis. Last name Sangrari. I'm actually a Syrian Christian, born in Iran, as you all know. And you mentioned Antifa. Actually, when I retired from the military in 2014, I established the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement and established it on September 11 in honor of the Americans that were murdered on our soil, and also the first responders that are still dying from the after effects of given the health issues that they're dealing with. And then the first mission we picked up was to help save the Syrian Christians that were fighting against ISIS and ISIL at that time in both Syria and Iraq. And I remember I was in Japan because I had gone there, and my company actually was sharing information with the Japanese PSIA, which is the equivalent of our Central Intelligence Agency. And I can talk about it because I didn't have any type of a written agreement with it, but we exposed a cell, an ISIS cell that was tied to actually Japanese operating in Syria. And I remember the first time when I was on the stage, it was in February of 2015, is when the ISIS attacked the Khabur River Valley, which is in Syria. And then following that, that was the first time we lost one of our guys in battle. And one of the commanders who was killed was actually killed by the YPG Kurds, who were working not just for themselves, but they were working, fighting against ISIS. At the same time, they were fighting against anyone else who had a footprint in that region. And when they ambushed one of our commanders going to a meeting, at that time, Antifa US and Antifa Europe were on the ground working with that YPG group. So we briefed, of course, the guys out of the Department of Defense, said, hey, Antifa US is there. I mean, Rolling Stone did an article on them and said, it doesn't make sense from a U.S. security perspective. You got these Americans that are over there supposedly helping these YPG guys that are a terrorist organization in regards to Turkey and NATO. And even they're ambushing now the Christian or Syrian leadership that we're working with because they're trying to establish their own socialist, republic, for the better term, as they stated it there in Syria once the combat operations are over. And when I ran for office here in 2020 against the 9th Congressional District minority seat, basically, Jan Schkowski, I mentioned it. And it's funny because sometimes you say that you got these organizations that are following you guys now. Antifa did a better job of breaking down my policies on their site than the Republican Party did, which I was running as a Republican. So sometimes it's better to just have the other side to kind of point out stuff on you that your own parties are not able to do. So it's all okay. I always say, Americans have a lot of time on their hands, so the best way to spend it, I guess, instead of watching sports and drinking beers, is to bash each other over the head politically. So let's see where it ends up. Hopefully it won't be in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party being the overlords of what used to be the United States.
Yeah. Can you tell the audience a little bit about the Near East Center, your strategic engagement organization, what the charter is? And then after you do that, as we transition into the Israeli Palestinian thing, talk a little bit about maybe your knowledge and insight, because you're going to help us as we go forward. We're going to play that interview I had with this young gentleman who's very intelligent, but he's skewed on his views.
Well, yeah, look, it wasn't just the Near East. The Near East, we're going to be, as an LLC, of course. This year, 10 years into the fight, I'm probably going to be heading back to the Middle East anyway, in recognition of what happened with the genocide. Really took on the mantle of being the advisory capability for the Syrian military force structures. Actually, we wrote Operation Collective Action, and the commander for our forces gave that, handed it over to the Office of the Secretary of Defense at the Pentagon, and it happened by just sheer luck to fall on the year after the Khabar River was cleansed out. So the Syrian Christians under U.S. watch going back for years now, prior to the invasion of Iraq, were almost 1.3 million. There's, as of a couple of weeks ago, when I was back in D.C., looking at the real numbers on the books, you get 100,000 left. So under U.S. supposedly protection, Siege SOTF, special operations, Delta, Navy SEALs, European Union, NATO, Koreans, Georgians who were all there, those certain Christians were just absolutely massacred and pushed out of their lands, and done so actually by mostly fights where the Kurds were encroaching on their territories in the north, and also, of course, between the Sunnis and the Shiite, and the atrocities that took place. And the Yazidis are pretty much wiped out. So all together, you're looking maybe 100,000 left now, which goes back to the issue, as we always talk about, right? What happens in war? In war, minorities die, and larger structures, in this case businesses, make their money. So as a friend of mine told me once, we were on the ground, he said, Sargis is trying to save the world, but I'm just trying to make money out of the chaos. And a lot of money is made in the chaotic process of what's happening in the Middle East region. If you go back and look at some of the investments of some of the major companies, and these companies are all tied, a lot of them are what the school systems that you have right now, 68 schools have a lot of stock investments in those companies, are the ones that are really profiting with what's happening in the Middle East currently with Israel. We established the United Assyrian Appeal, which is a 501c3, to raise money after what happened with the debacle of Afghanistan. I knew that we had to get into Africa, so I actually went to Africa. We kind of knew what was about to happen to the Christians of South Sudan, especially under the current leadership of Kiir. We looked at new leadership there, and we knew that there might be destability in Sudan itself. And of course, Sudan fell apart, and you know what's happening with the civil war there. So we also started supporting the Christian efforts of trying to help those refugees that are mostly stuck in Kenya. So I work with women organizations in both Iraq and Syria to try to help alleviate some of those issues for the Christians. And to be fair, for everybody to understand, the Christians are being butchered on a daily basis and killed across the entire Sahel, Nigeria, Middle East. And when you peel back the onions, there's always a Chinese conglomerate tied to what is happening with the Russians conducting operations through their Wagner groups. And in the Middle East is just basically under the so-called guise of Islamic terrorism, which really at heart is pushing as much of the Judeo-Christian ideology out of the Middle East. Most people don't know that if you look at Israel itself, Israel doesn't have American Jews, so many numbers living in it, or Europeans. It's mostly the Jews that were pushed out of the Middle East into Israel, especially when the Middle East started purging all the Jews out of their countries, from Iraq to Iran to all the other nations. And if you want to go back to the war that took place to establish the state of Israel itself, really at the heart of it. But, there's a larger issue that we could talk about historically to kind of give an understanding of what is happening in the region. And the Jewish community in the U.S. is really separate from the Jewish community in Israel that is on a daily basis fighting for its own survival.
Well, I got one question. So, because as we lead into this video, and you're making me think of, I asked this guy about who the original indigenous people were of Israel. And can you talk about that a little bit, or because I'm not deep in that subject, right? But I know 1,800 years ago or whatever, the Jewish people were there first, and then all of a sudden, they're big on indigenous people in the United States with American Indians, but then the Jewish people were there, my understanding, before the Palestinians. So do you know that history? Can you talk a little bit about that to set the context before we do that video?
Yeah, I know it, but it really is irrelevant to the point that they're trying to make. This has nothing to do. These talking points are just kind of BS talking points that are being used. It's the relevancy at the heart of it, and remember, I fought against insurgencies, led insurgencies, is the establishment of the encampments in the schools. If I can establish it, I've accomplished my mission. Whatever that kid says, who cares? It could be accurate, it could be non-factual, it doesn't matter. It is just the establishment of it which allows me to strategically control the messaging of what I'm trying to do in the long term. So a kid like that, maybe I'll put the recruiters in there that are going to look at it. You were mentioning about the American Indian or Native American. The Chinese are have a information operation to say that, well, it used to belong to us. We came across the frozen seas going back in the ancient times and should be back in the hands of the Chinese. Frankly, the dinosaurs, control all the world anyway, so we should give it back to them. But like for us, as an Assyrian, if you agree with the concept that the original individuals in that region call themselves Palestinian, and they didn't, there is no documentation in their hand going back thousands of years ago that says this is Palestine. If you're going to agree to that, then there should be a saying that Assyrian Christians use, which should be from the river to the sea too. That means ancient Assyria, 6,700 plus years ago, was the controller of that entire region. That means everything from the Tigris all the way into the Persian Gulf should belong to us, right? That means you got to remove the Iraqi Muslims, Shia, Sunnis, the Kurds, the Turks. Everybody needs to clear out. Get out of here. You don't belong here because I originally owned it. So technically, going back to even before the Phoenicians really established themselves there, there was an influence by our Assyrian garrisons. Bethlehem is known as an Assyrian garrison going back a long time ago when it was established because it was a trade route between Assyria and Egypt. By the way, we controlled Egypt. So does that mean that everybody pack your bags, get the hell out of here because it belongs to us? And if that's the case, then there's no Palestine, there's no Israel, if you don't even go back longer into the history. So, these discussions are just BS discussions. I go back to the whole understanding again. It's just the fact that you have to create these type of cell structures here. And for me, as a person who's run insurgencies, if I could bring what is coming to the southern border, and I could link what is coming out of the southern border with those young men, women, a lot of them who probably are from some of the socialist ideology countries that may not like Jews, I can now infuse and see who I can use to operationalize a few years from now. And a person like the gentleman you interviewed, if I can push him into the decision-making process where he's at the seat of the table, maybe somewhere in the State Department in 10, 20 years, I could put him at odds with the older generation of Americans who were pro-Israeli. Now today's generation is not. Then I've done what I need to do, right? Establish the ability to squeeze the Israelis and the Jews as much as I can, and possibly in the future go after their dollars and monies, because if their dollars and money is going to go back to support Israel, who's not being isolated, then that gives me an opportunity to target them institutionally. So this is just a whole process. A lot of the folks that you see that run these organizations, would be the Antifa and all that stuff, they're eventually going to die off anyway, right? The persons who run them and financially put money, which there's 5 major organizations and 68 different institutions, are the ones who are the controller of these individuals. As long as I can find somebody who thinks ideologically he's on the moral high ground, God bless. I like those people. I'll use it for my operational need. At the end of the day, it's for me to make money and hold power. It has absolutely nothing to do with the moral understanding or care about what's happening and what I should do from their perspective to advance humanity. Is just to advance that organizational structure. And once you create these structures even after the lead who created them dies off, they'll still be operational at some level or not. And if they have to transition, they'll just change their name, become a different organization. As long as the donation button goes from one organization to another and money's flowing, they don't care. They'll be happy.
Right. So a question for you, Sargis. You mentioned the money thing earlier, and you just ended there with it. And I agree with you that the relevancy of the history is not. I mean, land and government switch hands. That's just how human nature works. But the question would be, how much of this would you say is controlled by money, by the investment? Because you mentioned ISIS earlier, and a lot of people have suggested that Obama created ISIS by the policies that he put forth, by the control he had over the military in the region, and by the money that he funneled over there to Iran through the nuclear deal and so forth. And you heard Netanyahu not too long ago admit that Hamas as an organization is beneficial to his cause in fighting them because they're terrorists by nature. But it seems to me that it's interesting that Donald Trump had, when he was in office, no wars, and how easy that can be, how easy it can be to not have any wars. And go figure, and I don't believe in coincidences, now all of a sudden we have a corrupt regime in charge of the United States. And of course, we have 2 wars going on, each of which could ignite World War III at any moment. And of course, the U.S. is spending billions upon billions of dollars and obviously funneling cash to which we have the taxpayer has no accountability for. How much of this is just to benefit, dark money, people trying to play engineer with the world and people's lives?
Money drives a train. It drives everything. Without it, if there was no money in terrorism, it probably wouldn't exist. Look, when I told you I was in Japan, I saw what the Chinese were trying to do. They were trying to divide the Japanese and the Koreans under the whole concept of the so-called comfort women. And actually, I was in Japan giving a briefing with Michael Yon, who had done a friend of mine who had done actually a study on it. When we laid out that given what the information operations are that even the U.S. was pushing, and there's a comfort woman statue somewhere in San Francisco that U.S. has approved, you didn't have enough tonnage of the actual physical ships in the Japanese army to move that many comfort women. And by the way, they were fighting a war. So imagine that.
Sargis, can you explain to the audience what comfort woman, because they all don't know what that means?
Well, comfort woman is where, the Korean position that the Japanese were using Korean women as slaves and as prostitutes to satisfy their soldiers. Actually, the narrative, whatever might be historical facts, and this is what I'm trying to tell you in that discussion with that young man you had, is always skewed to push a certain geostrategic need for adversaries. In this case, trying to be an adversary, knowing that you're going to keep the Korean and the Japanese at bay, at odds together, if it wants to expand its footprint in Asia. Same thing. Classical stuff there is being done here on the ground, right? I think what Trump did, which led to those the Abraham Accords, was striving towards peace. With it going towards peace, you don't make money in peace, guys. You make money in war. Nations don't establish themselves in peace. They establish themselves in war. With everything that some of the folks that will tell you that the Jews for a long time wanting to go back, right, to the Holy Land. I mean, think about it. They were living in Egypt. Basically, Moses had the keys to the kingdom. He was a pharaoh without the pharaoh being there, inside of the family. But God said, no, you're going to you're going to go to a desert. You're going to lose 40 years there. You're going to have an entire generation change, and you're going to go back to this piece of dirt, okay? This desert area, which is almost like a postage stamp compared to other countries. Then when the Jews were in Europe, they were in Germany, There were the philosophers, the teachers. Germany at that time had some of the strongest laws on the books. I mean, the entire world was looking at German law. What did he do? He basically burned them into crisp and ovens and said, "You got to go back there." There's always been a calling for them to go back, and every time they kind of stray away from it, what happens? They get burned in, and they go through a conflict crisis, and they realize that you have to be on your own, as Netanyahu said. We have no choice. If the U.S. isn't going to support us, we're on our own. We're isolated here where we are. If Abraham's Accord had taken place under Trump, people were losing out a lot of dollars. Keep in mind, Khomeini came in and destroyed that entire region, absolutely burned it to a crisp. Fights, wars, future wars, terror operations began because of it. Shah was a great friend of Israel. Israelis had actually started working on a nuclear program for the Iranians, given the fact they knew that Iran would eventually have to get a nuclear bomb. Why? Iran, through the Caspian Sea, has Russia north of it, a nuclear power. Pakistan, on the border of Iran, you have Afghanistan, of course, Pakistan, you have Iran, a nuclear power. India, a country removed between Pakistan and Iran, a nuclear power. China, countries removed from either Afghanistan or Pakistan, a nuclear power. North Korea, two countries removed, nuclear power. Iran, by where it sat geostrategically, was going to pursue a nuclear path to be able to secure itself and not be a geography-wise a location that's going to be constantly be messed with other powers, whether it be Europeans or be the Asian nations. So Iran was always going to pursue a nuclear bomb. Israelis had to recognize that, but when the Israelis start working with the Shah, what happens? Suddenly, Khomeini shows up on the in the region, and Israelis and the Persians and the Jews have had a long historical relationship together. What happens when the Israelis start suddenly moving forward with the Abraham Accords to make peace with the Arab nations? Suddenly you have these issues with the wars. And now to ensure that Israel and the Jews will never be able to have a functioning, peaceful peace in the region, what are you going to do? You're going to isolate them globally. You're going to do what you're doing in the school systems, where you're going to establish these camps. You're going to establish these anti-Israeli groups together. Then you're going to have, either by choice or by stupidity, the U.S. Congress coming out and saying that, well, if you're anti-Israel, that means you're anti-Jewish. Now you're tying the Jewish religion directly to Israel itself. So that means every time Israel does an operation, every Jew on the planet gets blamed. I'm not sure if the congressional leaders really were smart enough to understand that if they do this, they're putting all the Jews globally in a bad position, or they were doing it on purpose to put them in that position. Then the other thing you're going to do, if I isolate you and I'm not going to support you, because U.S. doesn't need the Middle East anymore, I could care less about the Middle East. We can have our oil ourselves anywhere we want. We can be secured energy-wise independently. Then now, if you're a Jewish person in the future, where you say, well, I'm going to support Israel with funding, maybe through my 501c3 or other ways, now you can go after their dollars. And you could start putting him in the future, maybe in prison, going after their monies. And you could clean them out of Europe, everywhere else, to isolate them. Because in Israel, as I had talked about it a year and a half ago, I said, at the rate U.S. is going with the departure from the Middle East, if Iran ever flips and the leadership in Iran suddenly is gone, Israeli-Iranian relationship being strong, Israel will be the lead in the Near East in the future. That means it can counter China, Russia, and the U.S. And I guarantee you, U.S., China, and Russia do not want to see a strong Israel. How do you do it? You go find that one kid, you tell them that Israel has been oppressing Palestinians. If you ask them, okay, give me the actual history of Palestinians, show me something. You dig it out of the ground and show me that this is where the marker was established for the Palestinian people, and you can't find anything. But as long as I can have that guy protesting, I could set the stage for everything else and the conflicts inside of the United States to drive my points, to include possibly basically flipping the script on the so-called supporters of Israel in Congress, not knowing or knowing that they're basically screwing Israel by tying the Jewish community, I should say the global Jewish community, to Israel itself, based on the new law that they passed.
But Sargis, doesn't it seem like we're playing both sides? Because I mean, I agree with your assessment there, and I mean, it seems like we're an imperial power, so we benefit from stoking the fire on both sides of the fight. I mean, we're giving $3 billion a year to Israel, and in large part, our media apparatus is pretty supportive of Israel. I mean, obviously you have your Palestinian support, but I mean, there's an imbalance there in terms of where the money flows, I would say. And I mean, we're giving money to the Palestinian side indirectly as well, but it seems as though we're stoking both sides of the fire to try to keep the conflict hot.
That's how money is made.
Yeah.
Money is made for the United States and other powers that way. Now, people will say, how can you say that? You're sitting with the American flag behind you. Doesn't that put you in a bad position, especially on a program like this, that you may be talking bad about your government? I'm not talking bad about my government. What I'm trying to tell you is the fact that that's how money is made. The United States dollars, the way dollars flow to the Department of Defense, the way dollars flow to Congress, at the end of the day, when it comes out, it's all purple money. If we wanted to, we could, in a heartbeat, build the entire nation of Iraq. We could have done it just like that.
Yeah.
We could build any other place. We could do that internally here. We choose not to. So when you choose not to, there's a reason you're choosing not to do it, right? And what is the reason behind it? I've always said, when we were initially asked before President Trump went to his first engagement in Saudi Arabia, I was asked with my team to go and talk to the State Department and kind of brief them as far as what we think are the things that they should concentrate on. And I remember we chose a date that caught them by surprise. It was the date that the Sykes-Picot contract expired. And when we said today is the day that
can you explain what that? Sorry, explain what that contract is for us.
It was a contract between the British and the French on how to divide the Middle East, right? So it was an actual contract that that's how these countries came to be after the fall of the Ottoman Empire. So that contract was going to run out in 100 years. So 20 years prior to that, or a quarter of a century prior to that, nations started kind of working towards what the new structure of contracts would be to basically run the Middle East, if possible, in the long term, globally, with the various different global players. And we knew that the two powers at the time would be the U.S. and would be Russia. Now, fast forward to where it is, I think this is where a lot of people were just absolutely irate when Trump won, because it screwed up all those plans that they had put together, because the papers and the dollars were agreed upon. When I was in Japan, after I came back in 2015, I wrote an article on my site, Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. It's called New Power Relations. In 2012 was when Wang Yi stood on stage and gave a proposal to the United States as to what the Chinese Communist Party, not China, Chinese Communist Party, believes should be the relationship between the so-called emerging adversaries, in this case China and United States. And he gave that speech at Brookings Institute. However, when we thought Susan Rice was going to take the stage and see how we can counter what his proposal was, Susan Rice went to George Washington University, surprise, surprise, and said, this is how we can actualize that relationship. So if you look at it, since then, everything, to include the war between Russia and Ukraine, has been moving the chess pieces in that direction. Trump's presidency screwed up the process because it cut into what was agreed upon under the Obama administration to where we are today. So basically, under that requirement, and people can go to the Near East site and read the New Power Relations article, it was China was going to basically have the Asia, U.S. was going to pull out of the Middle East. It was going to concentrate internally and also on South America, our backyard, and either Russia or European Union were going to be the victors in Europe, whoever is going to be the strongest there, with everybody competing for the resources in Africa. That was basically what the Chinese Communist Party had proposed. And basically, U.S. agreed to it on a financial scale under Obama. When Trump came in, and with Abraham's Accord, it completely screwed up the entire planning process. Now, at least under the current administration, it's still kind of moving in that direction, but it's doing it haphazardly. Why? Because the Biden administration fell behind, or I would say, because the 23 execs of the Obama administration still worked in the Biden administration, it fell behind that plan. The one thing I've always said to the U.S. side of the House, whether it be the Obama guys or the Trump National Security Council, when I was there to brief and give white papers on what's happening, is that, look, listen, the Chinese kill people. You know, their conglomerates go in with the Russians, come in and whack everybody, or the Chinese pay some Muslim organization to go in and clear the Christian lands in Nigeria to establish its capability. The problem is you have American companies, a lot of them that are tied to those conglomerates that have dollars involved. The Chinese are doing the bad thing on the ground, but the profit money is coming back to those American organizations. And some of those American organizations who's got links and investments in the Soros of the world. Soros might be able to tell his folks or his son that I'm doing this for the benefit of mankind. Keep in mind, the guy was a Jewish person. Okay, he was a Jew who's anti-Semitic, who joined the Nazis and turned over the money that other Jews had in the region. And when he was given the opportunity of 60 Minutes to basically say, I was wrong, he had no regrets.
No regrets, doesn't believe in God.
Yeah, this person is at the heart of what we're talking about. And another piece that is very important historically for how we've gotten here and what affects the Middle East is Operation Paperclip. And I'm not sure if you all, your audiences know about it, but this is where, correct, we brought the Nazis back here. What did we do? We wanted the money. We wanted their thought processes. We wanted what they had in their head. So we gave them positions in MIT and UCLA and Harvard. And do you think a fascist Nazi is going to suddenly become a democratic flag-waving guy? No, he's still who he is.
Werner von Braun hung Jews outside of his rocket factory in Germany, and that's the guy who ran our space program for many years.
And what did we do when we wanted to have access to the Middle East? We took those guys, and they ended up becoming the individuals who basically worked with an establishment of the initial ideologies of the Ba'ath Party, which became the Arab nationalism of the Ba'ath Party of the Middle East.
Hey,
this is just these are the facts that I think sometimes these students and the schools just don't know. So there is a reason why there's fascism, Nazism, hatred of the Jews inside of the Arab nationalism that exists in the region. And as long as somebody can exploit it for their own benefits and dollars, why not?
Sure. Can I back you up for a second? Because you said something very interesting about the world order according to what the Chinese proposed. And that we were on a path for that, where we basically agreed that, it would be a regional control, and then we'd all fight over Africa. Now, you said when Trump came in and what he did with the Abraham Accord just kind of messed up the whole thing. And I know that Trump's a populist, so more of an isolationist. Do you know, was there a different perspective or view on how foreign policy, international relations would go according to the Trump administration? Was he just trying to break that whole, that whole deal up, cause chaos, or was there a different view that, the people close to Trump had put forward as a international relations?
I don't know if Trump really did a deeper dive on that concept. I don't think he was looking at it from a deep dive perspective. I know what he wanted to do was, along with every other really president, after we spent all our treasure in the Middle East for over 20 years, He wanted to leave the Middle East, but he wanted to work with India and counter against China. Look, even under Trump, when we put sanctions, hard sanctions against Iran, and we squeezed Iran, Trump went ahead and kept the port of Chabahar in Iran open in order to have the Indians come in and build a port area and a railhead for the Iranians to run that railhead into Afghanistan. Why did he do it? He did it because he wanted to put pressure on Pakistan, to put pressure on the Taliban to bring him to the table for negotiations. So nations do work this way, and leadership does work that way to be able to at least get what we wanted strategically for the benefit of the U.S., which was a pullout possibly out of Afghanistan with force structures there that anytime we wanted to, we could reach out and touch basically China, and we could reach out and touch Russia. Because from Afghanistan, you could affect the Southern Caucasus, where the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative goes, and we could counter China in the long term. But when you got somebody like the current administration comes in and just completely pulls out and turns over that entire basin, basically to the Chinese, you're giving up the strategic footprint. You've completely lost the ability of affecting these type of nation states. The two nations that would be pretty much against Iran becoming a nuclear power would be more China and Russia. Why? Because a nuclear Iran, if one day flips and becomes a great ally of Israel, it's game over for China and for Russia. Yeah. I mean, you pretty much screwed the Shanghai Corporation organization across the board.
Yeah.
But the problem is the current administration doesn't do a deep dive on it too. They kind of look at it in the simplistic ways and means of hopefully it will happen. No, you have to force it to happen. Yep. The only thing that forces changes, guys, is war.
Yep.
It doesn't happen in peace.
Yeah. So this is actually very insightful, good information, I think, for all of us. So we'll jump to the video, and what we'll do is we'll let this guy talk, then we'll pause it, Sergeant, so you can address some of the BS this guy's saying. Again, he's very articulate. I think you saw it, right? I think when I asked him, he was going to his degree is in Middle Eastern Studies and Religion or something like that. So, Jason, are you ready? Yeah. Play that video where we left off.
The desegregation.
Correct.
So yeah, there's different parties that not moral parity or symmetry.
You're saying there's an immoral difference between supporting Israel and Palestine?
Yes. It depends how you're defining the terms, but if you're talking about supporting
you got to remember, like, I'm a Southwest Side dumb Italian guy, so you got to talk in like lower terms. Talk in lower terms for me. So explain what do you mean by that?
What I mean is, if you're talking about either the regime of apartheid to which the state of Israel has subjected Palestinians from the river to the sea for more than half a century, or if you're talking about the current genocidal campaign that it is waging against especially the Palestinians.
So would you define genocide for me?
Sure. It's acts committed with an intent to destroy a national, religious, or ethnic group in whole or in part. And there's a very.
So do you think that the Israelis are really trying to destroy all of Palestine, or are they trying to go after those who attacked them, the Hamas folks? And then from the perspective of Hamas being purposely embedding themselves, like say if we were at war here and American soldiers came and embedded themselves with you guys here, right? And we were being attacked by somebody else that we attacked.
Right.
Well, how would you consider that?
The embedding themselves thing is a little bit complicated because it's more the case that Gaza is a ghetto that Israel has sealed the borders of, either directly in all the parts it controls or indirectly through collaboration with the Egyptian regime that was installed by coup. So the borders are completely surrounded. So the Palestinians are packed like sardines, 2.3 million of them, into a strip of land that's as long as a marathon and 6 miles wide. In that situation, there is no such thing as not being embedded if you're in any way fighting to defend your people against the genocidal onslaught. If the allegation is specifically that any Palestinian faction or resistance group has used Palestinians as shields in a coercive way, this is a question you can read reports. There's been investigations done after the 2008 assault, 2014 assault by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, B'Tselem, the Israeli Human Rights Monitor, the Goldstone Commission, The conclusion in every single one of these reports is that there is no evidence that Hamas or any Palestinian faction is deliberately using Palestinians as human shields, even as they are operating, given the constraints I described, in proximity to Palestinian civilians, though there has been evidence in each of those reports that Israel has at times used Palestinians as human shields.
All right, that was very interesting. Sorry. So instead of us talking, why don't you address some of the facts and some of the bullshit this guy's saying, how he's spinning it?
Well, look, nobody cares about what he's saying from the guys who run the show. I'm just telling you.
Yeah.
Look, nobody cares about what I say, you guys say, or he says. If we're not at the decision-making table, you know what I'm saying? If there's not money flowing through us, could care less. The significance of him just saying is important to allow the narrative to establish to make the money. It could be completely off of his facts. Nobody cares. Look, the Palestinian community will never stand with the Syrian Christian community, my community, and say that the Kurds of northern Iraq have to pack up their crap and go back where they came from. They were not originating there in northern Iraq. They came through Iran, and they came from the initial area they established between the border of Iran and Iraq. The reason they won't do it, they're not going to do that to another Muslim Sunni leadership, and it would be unrealistic for the Assyrian community, who's at 100,000, to say, millions of Kurds, pack your stuff, get the hell out of here. I don't care. You have a regional government. We're going to call this Assyria. We have more of a say, a claim, than the Kurds do. Kurds, pretty much from the Middle East perspective, are created ethnicity. If you go back, the only thing that they have historically in northern Iraq, going back 100 years ago, was a gravesite. Every time you dig on the ground, you pull on ancient Assyrian artifacts out. Antifa is not gonna stand with the Assyrians and say, get rid of the Kurds. They were supporting him. Remember, they killed one of our commanders on the ground. Antifa didn't do it. The YPG Kurds did, but Antifa US was there supporting them and learning lessons. Antifa's not gonna come and say on the campuses, we need to go support the Christian Assyrians and get rid of the Kurds. Especially the fact that they went through a genocide. Palestinians not gonna do it. So you as an American who are saying that we got to get rid of an entire nation state called Israel that has historical roots there in order to establish a Palestinian state. It makes no sense given the numbers of folks on the ground, given how everything is established. From the Syrian perspective right now, all I want to do is have my own regional area to be able to save my governance. If that governance happens in the greater country of Iraq, great. If it has to happen in other type of regional locations, because Iraq may split in the future, with Turkey looking at possibly going in sometime in late to early summer, then so be it, okay? The issue at hand, again, is that the American kids that are in these campuses, and whether they have knowledge or they don't have knowledge, they have the facts, they don't know how the facts, is irrelevant to me running an insurgency. I don't care what you babble. I don't care if you're articulate, you know the actual facts. You could debate, and win debates, whether you're right or wrong. I could care less. As long as you're there and I could use you for my purpose, that's all I care about. Now, when I'm in those camps, I'm going to look at who's willing to go and fight a cop, who's willing to push against a police officer, who's willing to burn a police car. Which organization, call it Antifa or whatever, is willing to do that? I'm going to use them for my benefit. Now, if I can bring these multi-age males through the borders and I could link them up together, guess what? I could pick and choose my folks that I'm going to put in future U.S. congressional positions, leadership positions where the laws are made, the budgetary positions. And if I could put them at odds with their parents, with the older generation, and I can fight each other, not only can I control the country for my wants and desires in the long term if I want to divide America, but I could at least use it now to squeeze the so-called Jewish community. Whether that person believes it or doesn't believe it is irrelevant to me. If I can now do that, create this network and also make money out of the network, God bless. The better off I am. The more money in my coffers, the easier it is for me to run these type of insurgency operations, to include if I want to collapse governments in the future, I'll use it to collapse governments in the future. That's all this is. This is simple insurgency operations, and a lot of these organizations have even no clue that they're being used by others.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying, actually. And I guess the question was more around the propaganda of what this kid's spewing and being pushed out on these other college students, these kids that they're trying to recruit, regardless of what organization's behind it or Soros money or whatever. It's like he's articulate, right? He seems like he knows what he's talking about, but he's spinning a lot of facts, and he's being used as a tool to kind of recruit some of these other idiot college Marxists into being part of that organization to eventually.
Well, these are not facts. Keep in mind, what's the first thing he said? He has a certain moral view. His moral view is how he's justifying what he's saying as being a fact. It's not a fact. A lot of stuff he said are actually completely wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, if you put it historically, it's all wrong. However, if he can tie it to a moral basis, then it's true, right? Then he actually is talking from a moral perspective. And if you can make him articulate, you put some fusions of morality into what he's saying, then God bless you, you know? And that's what I'm trying to say. And this is not geared towards anti-Semitism. Keep in mind, me as a person who has fought insurgencies, ran insurgencies, I'm going to use him. This is to divide America. Yeah. To divide the older generation of American and younger. It has nothing to do. I could care less as an insurgent leader what he says about Israel. Blah, 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 Israel, blah, 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 Palestine. Who cares? Yeah. Israelis, Palestinians in the Middle East don't really give a rat's ass what anybody says here. Maybe Hamas does, but Hamas is getting his ass handed to it on the battlefield. And, this kid's not helping it. This is to create a flip in the narrative in the long term to ensure that if I'm going to lead the Middle East, keep in mind, remember, if I left the Middle East, the only thing that we had that was really our ally in the region that gave us our footprint was Israel. But if I have made a decision I'm going to leave, let's sever this completely by ensuring that Israel is isolated, the Jewish community is isolated by itself in the region. And the only way we can squeeze Israel in the future, if we're not going to go back to the Middle East because we're going to concentrate on the plan that we agreed to with the Chinese Wang Yi, is to be able to squeeze the Jewish community leaders with money in the U.S. So the way I do it is I create these guys, let them talk, let them in 10, 20 years be in decision-making position, let the whole narrative flip as more anti-Israeli and more pro-Palestinian. I'll give you an example. You want to talk about the made-up ethnicity, and I know members of my community may not like it. In Iran, I was a Catholic, an Assyrian Catholic. I still am an Assyrian Catholic. My wife is a Assyrian from the Eastern Church. The first time I spoke to the Assyrian members of my community that were from Iraq, they're like, what are you? Are you Assyrian? I go, yeah. They go, what church you go to? I go, well, I go to the Catholic Church. Oh, then you're Chaldean. So what the hell is a Chaldean? Chaldean was a name that the Roman Catholic Church gave to Assyrian Christians that converted to Catholicism. And guess what happened? In Iraq, Saddam Hussein, who liked to divide people, took those individuals, he put them in positions of leadership inside of his circles. He didn't trust the whole Muslim community. He put certain Christians around it because there are certain Christians always loyal in various different nations. And suddenly, the Chaldean denomination became an ethnicity. Today, they fly their own flag and they say, well, we're a different ethnicity. How are you a different ethnicity? You come from the same villages that we came from. If I can do that from a Roman Catholic Church perspective, and Saddam can use that for his advantage to divide the Assyrian Christian community and make something an ethnicity, and I could do that internal to an Assyrian community, you don't think I could do that by creating some false so-called ethnicity in the region? whether I call it this or call it that. I could do it all the time, 24/7. And I could have everybody on the planet agree to it, to include have the United States government, when they're doing their resolution against a certain genocide, to take the Catholics and make them an ethnicity at the equal level of the Syrian Christians. They speak the same language. They come from the same villages. One practices Catholicism. The other one is denomination. The other one is the Assyrian Church of the East denomination. But I can put them on piece of paper in the American Resolution and say that they're both ethnicities, so I could divide them in the future and use it for my own benefit, and use them as two different lines of avenues to control the money within those two organizational structures. So in this case, I divide the dollars inside of that community, and I tap into it, use it for my advantage every time I want. It's not hard to do, guys. So this is very simple to do.
So right, divide and conquer. That's that's what any authoritarian regime has ever wanted to do, is divide the people so that they can't rise up against you. Totally get it. I'm trying to figure out how we combat this, Sargis, because I know when my toddler acts up, when he defies me or when he's having a temper tantrum, if I give it oxygen, it's going to get worse. If I ignore him, it seems to go away pretty quickly. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's mostly about the narrative. So, is the best way to combat this garbage is to not pay attention to it? Because clearly the media wants us to pay attention to these college kids. Me, specifically, I can't figure out why it's interesting at all that a bunch of college kids have something to say about how the world's working, because they haven't the first clue about how the world works, because they haven't gone out and made anything of themselves yet. But I'm just trying to figure out, and that's why I liked Trump, because it was why are we worried about, investing our hard-earned dollars in other countries when we have our own problems at home? Is that the way to combat this stuff, is to say, no, we need to look inward, like a lot of the new conservative movement is doing? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Again, the problem is money is not made in peace. It just isn't.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm at. That's not what I'm asking.
But hear what I'm saying.
Okay.
Money is flowing because of this chaos. Soros is irrelevant unless money flows through his coffers, right? And unless he's able to get money. And Soros is not even considered by the global leadership that runs these type of operations as being somebody they care about. Soros was a prostitute to the Nazis. He's prostitute to somebody else today. The guy who's a prostitute to Soros, imagine where he stands on the pecking order. Nobody. Okay? Look, it's hard to fight against your own kids, right? Your own kids have more money. Your kids have new technologies. Your kids have new ideas, which is nothing wrong with it. But if they don't have the basis of understanding how to use those ideas, that technology, and that money, and an outside influencer is able to get to them, and they're able to achieve status and position because of what they supposedly believe now, they can say, well, what I believe morally was correct. You are not able to move that thing. And you only have a certain amount of time on this planet to have a capability to influence, okay? I'm going to be 55 this year. 20 more years, I may have an influence. But if I have money and I have institutions that I've established, I can have far-reaching influences.
Yeah, 95 years old, like Soros.
Yeah. So establish the organizations to counter these type of organizations.
Oh, okay.
And then, if possible, get into them. And all you could do is educate them, let them know, and slowly dissolve them internally. But it takes a lot of money to do so. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of people who are more satisfied with internal divisions in the U.S. So U.S., what it may do external,
so you're
it would like to bring internal and make more money internally. rather than externally as he used to do in the past.
You're suggesting be like the communists, subvert these organizations from within, and that's how you're going to take them out.
Well, no. Look, it's not subverting him; it's countering him, right? I mean, I'm doing it for the survival of the U.S. U.S. is not going to survive if you're going to destroy everything about this Constitution and completely dissect it from one end of it to another.
Right.
It's just not going to survive. It's going to go away. I don't want to see it to lead to a global war because nobody's going to be happy then. Look, a long time ago, people in the U.S. in leadership made a decision. They're like, why do we even care about the Middle East? No, I told the Jewish community 5 years ago, I said, listen to me. If the Jews were removed from Israel and were put in Brazil, and Brazilians were put in where Israel is today, and the Jews were burned in an oven in Brazil, U.S. couldn't care less. The only people who might care something about it would be the evangelical community. Otherwise, U.S. leadership could care less. They would care about the Brazilians in that piece of property because of the strategic position for us to have access. But from a U.S. perspective, let's say Iran even gets a nuclear bomb. Okay, Iran has a nuclear bomb. Do you know how difficult it is to put that nuclear warhead on a intercontinental ballistic missile and launch it against the U.S.? It's very difficult. From the U.S. perspective, who cares? I don't care anymore because I'm independent energy-wise. Why am I going to concentrate there? That's how the leadership in the U.S. has looked at it for a long term. It might not be the moral way to look at it, but that's how they looked at it from a strategic positioning point. And I think what is happening with the anti-Semitism taking place right now, U.S. was going to leave, but they always thought they could have an influence on Israel. When Israel started expanding with the Abraham Accord, they're like, wait a minute, that's not going to happen. We have to have leverage on them somehow. So how do you have leverage on them? There you go.
Bingo. Yeah.
So let's go. Let's hear this kid a little bit more. This conversation has been awesome. I feel like I'm back in college, and to hear a little bit more, and we'll address some of this whack jobs propaganda.
Where was that?
So it happened.
Where was that evidence from? I'm hearing the other, and I know a lot of my friends were in the military, and when they were over in Iraq, they were using the Americans were trying to save innocent civilians, while at the same time the ISIS terrorists were using shields of people in the community, and a number of friends had a heart. I had a friend that one of his buddies got killed. They thought it was a civilian, and they were dressed up and embedded within the civilian population. And then another question for you is, after October 7th, right, after what happened to Israel, what if you had the authority, what would you have done in response to what happened on October 7th?
The authority of who?
If you had the authority in Israel, and you were in charge.
Prime Minister of Israel?
Yeah, and then you were attacked like that on October 7th, what would be your response to defend your people and some of the atrocities that occurred on October 7th?
Okay, so part of the problem, I promise I will answer your question directly, but I do need to give a context for how I answer it. The context is that the story does not start on October 7th because the war is not starting on October 7th. The war is ongoing against the people of Gaza, especially for almost 2 decades before October 7th. When they were placed under military siege, blockade, basic foods, goods, medicines were denied entry into the Strip on a regular basis. People were denied access to leave even to the West Bank to get life-saving medical treatment, and periodically there were operations that the Israeli military described as mowing the lawn, meaning every now and then when the Palestinians act up in Gaza, you keep them down by subjecting them to aerial bombardment. Each of these operations, about 60 to 80% of the people killed are civilians, thousands of homes destroyed, and so forth. So if you're a Palestinian then who's say 20 years old, you've lived through 5 large-scale high-tech massacres, as well as a nonviolent protest movement in 2018, 2019. The Great March of Return, which is every Friday, there would be a nonviolent protest. In response to this was Israeli snipers opening fire. You can read, again, UN reports about this, other reports about this. They injured more than 30,000 people. They killed more than 250 people. They sniped medics, Muslims on prayer mats, people in wheelchairs, children, etc. Only one soldier had a slap on the wrist.
I guess.
So my point is, this is the background.
Yeah, okay.
So when you get to October 7th, you say, what do you do? Well, what you first have to, same as 9/11 or any type of situation like this, the first thing you need to ask is, what is the root of the violence that we just got hit with? Because if you're not addressing the root and you're just trying to address the symptom, it is very likely that you're actually going to aggravate the root in a way that generates further violence for yourself and as well as for the people that you're inflicting it on. So I would try to get to the root of the violence and see if it has it. Now, I grant that there are in some rare cases.
All right. There you go, Sargis. So how do you address some of
he
these?
doesn't sound like, sounds like he's a pretty smart kid.
No,
he's articulate, I guess I would say, but
I wouldn't even say that. Look, from my perspective, knowing the Middle East, I'm like, everyone like, God bless you. Look, no decision is right or wrong decision. It's just a decision. There's consequences to it. His decision to join the so-called that he believes morally is just is a decision. What is the consequence to United States? It is a consequence of division, creation of anti-Semitism in the long term to put pressure on Israel 10, 20 years from now. But to put pressure on them, you got to go after their dollars. What the Jewish community in U.S. is completely separate ideology-wise than the Jewish community in Israel. The Assyrian community in the U.S. is completely different how they think about things than the Assyrian community that is living in the the jaws of the wolf in the Middle East. So it is creating a squeeze and a turn away from Israel to put pressure on the dollars here. You want to defeat the organizational structures for enemy, go after the dollars. Go after the head of the snake. This guy is not the head of the snake. Mm-hmm. He may be somebody who will support the tail in the long term and maybe become even, let's say, president of the United States in the future. He has an opportunity. He was born as an American citizen, gets enough support and funding to be that. But even at that, it's the division that you're causing, right? Yeah. Is the break that you're causing. The benefit for the enemies of the U.S. is to completely break it away from that Judeo-Christian belief, squeeze the Jewish community that has the monies here to make it in the future possibly illegal if they support Israel financially because Israelis are by themselves, destroy the ability of the Abraham Accords to be anything successful in the region, keep the so-called narrative of Palestinian oppression, going in order from the U.S. perspective to squeeze the Jewish state in the future and the Jewish dollars here, but from the perspective of other enemies of the United States to be able to squeeze United States internally if it wants to for their benefit. Whenever that comes, who knows? It might be in a future war against one of our near peer adversaries as an example, with China. Listen, if we go to war with China tomorrow, we'll destroy China. Chinese abilities and the weapon system they have, maybe the first couple of days would be ugly, but there's stuff we have that would absolutely wipe them out. The presidents of the United States, most of them haven't been briefed on the stuff we have. The last person that I think was briefed probably was Bush Sr. After that, none of the other ones were at the level. Yeah, to be briefed.
The CIA, that's why. But Sargis, look, you're giving, and I appreciate this. I've learned a lot during this conversation. You're giving me the strategic game of risk perspective on this whole situation. But like, I'm going to put you on the spot. First of all, how are we supposed to know what the truth on the ground is in the Israel-Palestine conflict? And in your opinion, who's the good guy in this situation?
You're the soldier on the ground and somebody's trying to kill you and you're shooting back. That's where the truth is. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It is between those two combatants. It depends on who's going to win. Look, if you want to talk from a moral perspective, I'm going to equate something that needs to be understood. The Hamas leadership is Muslim. The Jewish leadership is Jewish, okay? the Jews believe that they were given their descendancy for that land or inheritance through Abraham. Okay. The Palestinian has come in and said, no, we have been given that. So that means the land you're working on doesn't belong to you. So you have to leave. The problem is when you tie it to Islam and Islamic radicalism. Let's say tomorrow the Jews said, you know what, the hell with this. You want this? F you, take it, just like we gave you Gaza. And they all pick up and they fly to another planet, okay? And the Palestinians now have a place and they can call it Palestine and put their flag, whatever they want on it. The problem is with the narrative that the organization like Hamas under Islamic leadership has put is that we can never allow anyone to be alive, whether on this planet or another planet, if they say that we have the inheritance because it was given to us through God, through Abraham, who was given the inheritance of that piece of property. So that means I got to go find a 2-year-old Jewish kid. If he's the only 2-year-old Jewish kid living on the planet somewhere in Ohio, in some, town that has 200 people living in it, and I got to put around to him because I cannot allow anyone to ever come back and say, I'm the inheritance of this. These two entities, the ideologies, will never be able to work towards a solution to be able to coexist, which is the reason that every time there's been a proposal for the Palestinians to be able to have a state solution with 80% of everything being given to them, they've rejected it because from the Palestinian perspective, when it comes to the Islamic radicalism, they go, wait a minute. Why am I agreeing for you, a Jew Israeli, to live in my house, even though you get 20%, I get 80% of it? This is my house. You need to get out. You're not going to get anywhere. The two-state solution is some bullshit, pardon the language, that some American diplomat has come up with.
Right.
Because Americans don't understand how the Palestinian and Palestine thinks, not the freaking Palestinian who's sitting in a college here, and how the Jew in Israel thinks, not how the Jew who's living in Chicago is thinking. They don't understand that. They never have. That's why they've never understood it. And they haven't been able to teach their kids that. That's why this young man who's going to the University of Chicago, who's supposed to be providing some of the best and the brightest, has no clue. I guarantee you, if you show him what I just talked about, he'll be like, his entire brain capacity will reset to understand how nations work and operate on this in this world. For us Assyrians, the entire northern Iraq was Assyrian land. We have 6,000 plus years of history. The Kurds actually take their name from an ancient word Kurda, which was a reference to the Assyrian warriors, means fierce warrior. They took from the Persian language, Arab language, created a language for themselves. The dictionary just showed up. The entire planet supports the Kurds to have a place. By the way, in World War I, when the Ottomans were killing the Armenians, the Kurds were killing the Assyrians. 2/3 of our nation got butchered and massacred. Most of the Kurdish women, if you go back to their ancestries, were probably taken as rape victims from the Assyrian villages, which the Kurds in World War I raped to create their own ethnicities. But today, the Assyrian is not as a Judeo-Christian thinking person. I'm not going and saying, Kurd, you cannot live here. I'm saying I need to have my piece of property here, just like you do, is my land. You can live in my land. I can live in your land. I'm not going to go back and say, 100 years ago you did this. I got to get rid of you. The problem is the Palestinian doesn't know how to do that with the Israeli. That's why when the Israeli gives him Gaza, he turns around and says, I got to go kill and get rid of the entire state of Israel, which is the whole concept of from the river to the sea. If he does what the Assyrian does, it's very simple. You could cohabitate and live together. But if you're not willing to do that, then you're never going to get to a point. Israel is a nuclear power. I mean, have some brain capacity behind what you're saying as a student in the University of Chicago. Do you honestly think the state of Israel is going to go, yeah, you know what, we'll just pick up and leave because you have an issue about what's happening here because you're not on the ground to understand the fight. The Assyrian Christians ain't going out to kill every single Kurd, Turkmen, Shabak, Iraqi Sunni, Iraqi Shia to say that this is my land, you need to all get out. I gotta kill you all. Now here's my Assyrian flag, and this is going to be called Assyria. In the future, in Assyria, if it's established, which I have more of a right than the Palestinian has, I hate to tell him, in Palestine, if he calls it, I have more right to it than he does. I actually have actual physical, cities built there, history built there. I have every time you dig in the ground, something comes up that says, I am Assyrian.
Cradle of
that area
right?
will in the future have a Kurd living in it. It will have an Arab living in it. It will have a Muslim living in it. It will have an atheist living in it. It will have a Christian living in it. It will have a Chinaman living in it. It will have a Russian living in it. But the problem is the Palestinians have to be able to understand that. And until they come to a reality to understand it will never happen. The issue of Palestinian and Israelis will not be solved by these protesters in University of Chicago. It will not be resolved by what I say and by what you say on this program. It will not be resolved by some schmuck who joined Antifa that's monitoring this program. It will be resolved when finally the Palestinians on the ground and the Israelis get to a point, then they realize that, yeah, this is not working. You were fighting for a piece of dirt that everybody's like sitting back, scratching their head saying, why are you fighting over this thing? It's strategically no longer a value to anyone. Eventually, they will come to an agreement together and realize it. But as long as you got Islamic radicalism that is tied to a philosophy that is being led by these organizational structures that are generating the support and the funding for these organizations like Hamas, you will never be able to get to that point. They're the only ones who can get together and finally resolve that issue.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, I would just, my last question. You're very much a realist, and I appreciate that about you, and learned a lot from this conversation. I would just ask, where does idealism fit in? And let me expand on that. Living in a country where the government structure is supposed to be one in which it represents the will of the people, right? It would make sense to me that the pragmatic approach here would be to be non-interventionist. Now, I understand from your perspective the reality of nations and how they operate. I mean, I just see like the United States has become a country that has abandoned its principles and the meaning for which the government was created or that the Constitution was written for. So again, I ask, where does idealism fit in the sense that we're losing our country, we're losing our freedom to an imperialist drive that seems to have gone out of control? Where does idealism fit in to try to save our country?
Oh, look, at the end of the day, is an idealism that has us doing what we do for the rest of our life, right? Because when we die, we want somebody to say, look, this person did something better for the world, did something that was productive, that helped. I'm more of a guy who understands the strategic importance of keeping an ally like Israel. I understand it. Look, Israel has never recognized the Armenian or the Assyrian genocide. Never. But I don't hold that against them because I understand the strategic reason why they don't do it. And I understand the strategic importance of the state of Israel for the benefit of our long-term capability to possibly bring peace in the region. Some others fear it. And when they fear it because they're worried that it may screw up what they could get at the long term with a peaceful region, which means money, less influence, then they try to meddle into it. Folks, there's a lot of people there who don't care, who don't have a morality. They don't have a basics in their lives. It doesn't exist. For them, it's just a matter of make as much money as possible. It doesn't matter how I do it. Use it for my benefit. And God bless. Hopefully in the future, I could be in a position of power and sustain and feed my next generation. Look, The deep state is an issue that has been brought up before. I want to make a quick mention here. Deep state is an ideology that has existed long time ago in the United States when initially we fought the Revolutionary War under the ideals of fighting against this tyranny. And the Americans won. When the Massachusetts militia came back, the Massachusetts itself basically took their lands a year later. Why? Because they said, you haven't paid a tax. You haven't worked the land. When the militiamen said, what are you talking about? I was fighting for you to be free. How the hell was I going to run the land to make the money to pay my tax coffers? Massachusetts didn't care. When those militiamen turned around and went and took the armory, Massachusetts went ahead and took money, raised another militia, went after them and pushed them away. Some of the leaders of that armory takeover ended up basically dying poor people on the streets of New York. This concept has always plagued us. Okay? Massachusetts didn't have enough money to turn around and say, you know what, you were fighting for on our behalf. We're going to give you the benefit, but work the land and pay us back in the long term. But they took that money and went to raise another militia and got rid of the initial militiamen who felt that they were wrong. So this is always going to be a fight, guys. Ever since Cain, the older brother Abel, picked up a rock and bashed him in the head and killed him, the fight has always been there. Abel was dead, and Cain went off and got married and basically had kids and populated the earth. There's never a right or wrong or fair or not fair. It's reality. You choose what you want to fight for. And if you think that's a good thing and you think it's a just thing, then I cannot tell you that you shouldn't fight for it. I'm just telling you from a strategic perspective, as an American who understands the importance of why we need to support Israel. I can even tell you what the Congress of the United States did under their belief that, well, we're going to expand the definition of anti-Semitism and we're going to tie any attacks against Israel to the Jewish people themselves. You just basically screwed every Jew on the planet because you literally tied them to every decision Israel takes.
But you keep saying there's no right, there's no wrong. As a religious man, you don't have a moral inclination?
No, I do have a moral inclination. I've been helping the Syrian Christians. I think that the Christians should have a footprint in northern Iraq. But technically, if I am a strategic thinker from the U.S. and not thinking as a Christian, Judeo-Christian person, to want to have the Syrian Christians have a place in their own historical homeland, then I would be like, let's get rid of the Syrian Christians because they'll never listen to what we have to say because they'll always have a moral background to fall back on. If I could make them secular, maybe I can use them, divide them and conquer them for my own benefit. But as long as they got that fear that there's a God and that God is a Judeo-Christian God and there's certain moralities that are built into their inherent religion and churches, then that individual is someone that I may not be able to penetrate. There's three ways as you could penetrate somebody for an insurgency, right? You could leverage them. And they're very simple. Money, we always said put a skirt in front of them, a woman that you could use to leverage against them or put pressure on their family members. And if none of those works, guess what happens in an insurgency operation, just like in the mob? Well, he's not taking money. He's not falling for the skirt. He doesn't care what we do to his family members. There's a round in his head and it's over. Next.
Yep. So I guess in closing here, a couple things. So this has been awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree. I've been saying this, and I got in this war. I think this is one of the most important wars we've ever been in. And we're in the middle of a war. Most people in America, they don't realize we're in a war, and we're losing that. I don't know if we're losing badly. I don't know if you agree with that. And then I'd like to have you on the show sometime in the future. I'm in Italian South Side Catholic family, right? My mom, I was Walter Boy. My kids went to Catholic school. I'm embarrassed of the Catholic Charities and what they're doing to our country, and they're basically the logistics arm of the cartel and pumping all these Venezuelans and illegals who are eventually going to be part of the collapse of America unless we do something dramatically to change it. And the other thing I want to talk about is Antifa, and I understand the network of Antifa and some of those jamokes that are watching us right now, and they're tied into promoting and helping getting the funds and organizing these college students, as well as, and I predict that the DNC convention will be worse than 1968 unless something dramatic happens, because they didn't have the Antifa coordination as they did, and they have all this young college students thinking about Hamas and all these crazy things. It's going to blow up. Then you got the African American community that are moving towards Trump that want to go there and protest. I believe unless something drastic happens, it's going to be a nightmare. So, with that said, what are your closing statements addressing that and whatever else you want to say?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the numbers we're looking at, maybe somewhere around 35 to maybe even 45,000 that are going to be protesting at the DNC. Again, Americans, you have to understand that whether you're an Antifa guy or you're a guy who believes in the same thought process that me and the hosts here think through, you're just being used in the process. It has nothing to do with the Israeli-Palestinian issue for the folks. This is to try to see how many divisions I can create internally in the U.S., okay? And if I can get 40,000, 45,000, and I can push, and they believe that we're doing it because we want to make sure there's justice for the Palestinians, has nothing to do from the guy who's running the show for the Palestinians. Could care less. You could call them SpongeBob SquarePants and give them a freaking some other color. It's to push the narrative and bring the folks to the southern border, tie these two together to have an operational cell 10 to 20 years from now internally into the country. That's it.
Do you think there's special ops from our enemies that are going to be working behind the scenes on the coordination of these folks?
Of course. Yeah, wouldn't you put your special operations there? Come on.
Yep, I've been saying that. Yep.
I mean, you don't have to be a genius to know these things. This is simple stuff, folks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's an obvious. If you look at the George Floyd situation from 2020, I mean, I think we're ripe for. So all of this is coordinated, right, Sargis? I mean, it's so obvious to me, these protests, that they just pop up out of nowhere. I mean, it was quiet for a while, and then all of a sudden they pop up out of nowhere. And
I mean, there's money to it.
Right.
We know there's organizations. A lot of, I mean, most of this is in open press, so it's not like we're giving some top secret stuff.
Right.
So when there's money involved, the person who's investing the money and that organization that's investing it isn't investing it for the benefit of humankind. They're investing it for the aims of the leaders of that organization. And whoever is the guy who's got the gun to the head of that leader and saying, look, here's the deal, dude. Here's what you're going to do.
Right.
Whether you like it or not. You want to die a hero, or you want to die a martyr, or you want to die. Pick one. And most of the time they're like, well, I'd rather die a hero. So, Soros himself is just another dude. And there's more people that can use a guy like Soros than anybody else. If you could create a lot of these Soroses in the future, God bless you, you could run rapid everywhere you want in any country. And as long as you can make a profit out of whatever you're trying to do those places, then, you find a way, a good business plan to put money in your coffers and for your next generation.
Sargis, the more I learn about how the world works, the more I see like a mafia style, directive controlling things. Is that
there is, but the difference is, and if anybody's ever worked with the mobs and understand the mob has integrity. The other folks don't have integrity.
Sorry, I'm glad you said that, right?
Muerto, right?
Yeah. So, because I don't know if it was a couple shows back. I changed my life dramatically. 35 years ago, I got in trouble. I was recruited as a young man by Southside Chicago mob guys that were transitioning from chop shops into drugs. Never been involved in it. I was recruited. And as I transitioned my life, right, after I paid my debt to society and all that other crap, right, and then I worked in the film business, then I worked in high tech. I'm still in high tech. Now I'm in politics. And as I transitioned from that lifestyle, and I've been saying, I said this on the show a couple of weeks ago, that the morals and ethics are worse and worse. Like the further up the food chain I go with, the corporate world, now in the politics, and you think that you're working with more ethical people. I had more trust in the people I dealt with back in the 80s and 90s. So yes, you got to be guarded. Yes, you're dealing with people that are criminals and they do bad things. But when you talk and have a discussion and stuff, they're criminals, but at the same time, it's hard for me to,
let me give you an example. Just a few weeks ago, there was a widow whose husband, I think almost 30, 40 years ago, 4 decades ago, was part of the mob. And there was flooding, rains, and the house got flooded. The organizational leaders of the mob got together and took care of that widow, took care of the house, took care of the flooding issue, brought the people in to clean it up. We're talking about somebody who's been deceased 40 years, an old woman. Mm-hmm. The people I'm talking about that do these type of operations wouldn't lift a dollar, a penny to help that widow. So that's the difference. Mm-hmm. There's a morality that exists. And I guarantee you, if you take some of your mob guys and literally put them in, and this is an open source. I'm not even talking about some of the stuff that, are talked off camera. Mm-hmm. And they knew the type of people and how they do operations. They would be shocked. They'd be like, oh my God, and they call us criminals. Yeah. And you know that if you violate something, yeah, folks get killed, if they don't understand what the realities are in the mob. But the reality is that the other side doesn't care, folks. It doesn't care. It doesn't care about that Antifa leader. It doesn't care about his kids. It doesn't care about his mother. It don't care about the Palestinian, and it don't care about the Jew.
Yeah, I had a friend in my early 20s that died, and we're talking about certain individuals, right? And just like regular society or corporate world, there's like really, really scumbags, right? Doesn't matter if you're on the street, corporate world, or politics, right? And there's some that stand out, and you got to be more guarded, and you talk about it, right? You all talk about it. So my friend who's got killed, and we're talking about this one, I'm not going to say names, and he's like, Noose, come on, man. He goes, if you get screwed by so-and-so, it's your own fault. You know he's like that. You know he's going to stab you. You know he's going to get screwed. Well, guess what happened to my friend who killed him? And I was shocked that, you have that this happened to this good friend of mine, and knowing who this person is. And then when you move into this world, you kind of drop your guard at certain times, Sargis. It's new for me in the politics, and I've never been involved in it. I'm 62 years old. In the last 3 years, there's the biggest scumbag, backstabbing, sleazy, grinning, phony bastards that are politicians. And I'm just shocked, right? And these are the people that are running our country, and it just scares me to know that there's so much influence and control under these scumbags, these backstabbers, and it's just incredible. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And they're using the kids like that kid, right? That kid's future is pretty much now funneled into this direction. I'm 55. I get enough sense to know if I want to make a change, I can. That poor kid is now funneled in a certain direction. You know how hard it would be for him to turn around? Pride is a hell of a thing, and say, you know what, I think what I said some years ago was a mistake. They'll destroy him.
Oh, come on. I used to be a Democrat. No. I found
that's different. That's different. There's two political parties, right? Yeah. You choose the one that you think is going to best represent what you want for your benefit. So that's, we have two parties. That's it. One is Democrat, the other Republican.
I was a Democrat when I got in trouble. What do you expect?
What do they say about it? What do they say? If you're young and you're not a liberal, you have no heart. If you're old and you're not a conservative, you have no brain.
I was a Democrat union until I went in the Army, and then Clinton policies hit, and they had the whole "don't ask, don't tell," and I didn't want to be a piece of meat in the shower,
Yeah.
So then I became a Republican.
But then you got all the unions and I mean, it's just crazy. There's so much stuff. I'd love to have you on in the future, and we could talk about this Antifa stuff that you know about, and how, and the knowledge and insight of what I know what's going on here in the city of Chicago. They're using Antifa to come after parents that speak out, right? And they come after and try to harass, and I mean, these guys are pasty white, pencil neck basement dwellers, and you guys know who I'm talking about. I could fart and knock 3 of them over at my age, and they're being used to try to intimidate and harass parents, and it's getting old.
But Antifa doesn't have to do it. They choose to do it. Yeah. But when somebody gives you money, guess what? You could be Antifa, you could be some employee working for a company, but the boss gives you money, shut the hell up and do it.
Yeah, right.
So that's all you do. You're basically working for somebody for money in your pocket. And if you're not making money and being part of Antifa, you're an idiot. Because I guarantee you, looking at the dollars that flow through that organization, your bosses or whoever is the guy who's telling you, giving you advice, saying, I'm not making money, is making money. Organizations like this do not exist without dollars.
Ideology has a price tag, right, Sargis?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's all at the end, follow the money, and just follow the money. Look, I hope... what I say, again, is just what I know knowledge-wise. You ask a question, I answer it. I hope it helps.
Yeah.
If it helps people to kind of change their perspectives, God bless. If it doesn't,
this is
God bless.
awesome. I felt like I was watching History Channel or school or something. But do you have a closing statement you want to say, and then we'll just wrap it up?
Yeah, I mean, look, my closing statement is, look, we as Americans internally, regardless of where you come, what end of the aisle, the country is being targeted. Just don't be used. Make sure you don't be used. Make sure they're not using you for their benefit. 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when I was in DC, and I cannot tell you I cannot tell you the video, okay? But I can tell you that the forensic teams that look at videos out there, breaking down the video to the smallest pixel, the forensic team couldn't tell if it was AI generated or somebody shot the video. That's not good. We're talking about 2024. If the forensic teams can't do it, guys, and we have a society that's grown up on videos, doesn't read, doesn't do deep dives, doesn't ask the important question, doesn't say, where is this information coming from, where is this funding, you're in trouble. I lived in an easier time. The gentlemen on this show have lived in an easier time. You as a young guy, you're screwed.
Yes.
So
I've been saying that.
Please read, educate yourself on multiple sources, find out what the realities are, and don't try to read somebody else's brain. You want to learn the reality, go on the ground in both Israel and in Gaza and figure it out from there. Otherwise, I'm telling you, most of the time you're being used. Don't waste your effort. Go out there, get a simple job, get married, raise the next generation of Americans, have some pride, enjoy a 4th of July with your family, and be friends. Stop dividing each other and destroying each other under the guise of what? What are you going to achieve at the end when everything's destroyed? Nothing.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks. So where could people reach you at?
They could go to the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement, and
what's
basically
the website?
Google, Google search the necsc.net or nec-sc.com. They could follow on Twitter. I'm also a host on the National Security Hour on iHeartRadio. They could go there and listen to some of the interviews I've done, and also I have a show every Monday, New Paradigms with Sargis Sangrari. Again, I just look at things from a different perspective. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong perspective, but pretty much given my operational experiences, I guarantee you what I have to say does have credibility more than anything else.
Thank you this is awesome, man.
Yeah, really enjoyed the conversation, learned a lot, appreciate the realist point of view. It was great talking to you, Sargis, and I hope to have another conversation with you in the future.
Thank you. Much appreciated. God bless you all.
Thank you, man.
Too.
Thanks for everything.
Bye.
Cool. That was actually I think it was one of my favorite shows.
That was awesome. He was a wealth of he was a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I think I learned more from him than any other guest, really.
Well, speaking of which, so we're gonna go from Sargis to next week. We got a special guest.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Actually,
who's going to be our guest?
George Santos.
You guys know who George Santos is from New York?
Yeah, this is the guy that lost his House seat. Now you can say whatever you want about this guy, which there's plenty of controversy surrounding him. I need to actually brush up myself on the allegations and whatnot. But one of the issues of the whole thing was that they decided to kick him out. And
That's what pisses me off.
That shouldn't have happened that way.
Yes. So we're being told this real time to both of us, right? A bad Republican is better than a Democrat, which maybe that's true. I don't know if that's true or not, but we're told this over and over and over again, right? We're going after bad Republicans that are really selling us out, right? Bad. So
see, I think the opposite. I think a bad Republican is worse than a Democrat.
I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm kidding. I fucking hate them. Sorry. Whoops. Sorry.
Well, I mean,
we're going after the bad. They're not even Republicans, so forget that. That's a whole other conversation.
That's the issue, yeah.
Right? We'll get. I mean, so George Santos, if he did all those things that were egregious and kind of goofy, none of us agree with it, right? But with that said, the Democrats won't get rid of anybody. So then we have such a thin margin in Congress. These rhinos got rid of him, and he's replaced with a Democrat. So we're going to let him speak, to his mind on what happened. It's going to be fun.
Listen, at the very least, everybody can probably agree this will be an interesting conversation.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Fun. It's going to be interesting.
I mean, I want to ask him some questions.
Yeah.
I was trying to stick him with Sargis with some tough questions, and he's pretty good. So we'll see. I mean, Santos was a politician, so he'll try to. I'm guessing he's going to be a bit of a spin doctor, but it'll be fun. It'll be fun.
So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, appreciate you joining us. Hope you like the show. See you next week. Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, you too, Weasels, Antifa. If you get, fuck it.